My family kicked me out and blamed me for my brother's drunk driving accident, so I showed up as a witness for his court case. When I was 22, my brother Caleb was the golden child who could do no wrong. Star quarterback, full scholarship to state, dad's pride and joy. I was the disappointment, community college dropout, working at a gas station, constantly compared to my perfect little brother. The night everything changed started like any other family dinner. Mom made Caleb's favorite lasagna to celebrate his latest football award. Dad spent the entire meal bragging about scouts calling, about NFL prospects. I sat there invisible, picking at my food while they planned Caleb's bright future. After dinner, Caleb announced he was going to a party with teammates. "Drive safe," Mom called out, not even looking up from her phone. "Always do," he grinned, jangling his keys. I was in my room when my phone rang at 2:47 a.m. Dad's panicked voice cut through the silence. "There's been an accident. Hospital. Now." I threw on clothes and drove through empty streets, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. At the ER, I found my parents in the waiting room, Mom sobbing into Dad's shoulder. "Where's Caleb?" I asked. Dad looked up, his eyes red and furious. "In surgery, and this is your fault." My stomach dropped. "What? You were supposed to be his designated driver," Mom wailed. "He called you. You ignored him." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my call log. Nothing. No missed calls from Caleb. "I never got a call," I said. "Don't lie," Dad hissed. "He told us he called his big brother for help and you hung up on him. Said you were too busy with your loser friends to help family." The accusation hit like a physical blow. I checked my phone again. Call logs, texts, voicemails. Nothing from Caleb that night. "I'm not lying. Look." I showed them my phone. Dad barely glanced at it. "You probably deleted everything to cover your tracks, just like you've been covering for your drinking problem." "I don't have a drinking problem." "Then explain why you smell like alcohol right now," Mom said, her voice cold as ice. I'd had one beer hours earlier while watching TV. One. But trying to explain felt pointless. They'd already decided I was guilty. The doctor emerged, looking exhausted. "Your son is stable. He'll recover. But there are charges. DUI, reckless endangerment. The other driver, she didn't make it." Mom collapsed back into her chair. A woman was dead because my brother drove drunk, and somehow this was my fault. Over the next week, the family narrative solidified. Caleb had called his responsible big brother for a ride. I'd abandoned him, forcing him to drive drunk. The golden boy was just a victim of his terrible siblings' negligence. They kicked me out 3 days after the accident. "We can't look at you," Dad said, throwing my clothes into garbage bags. "Every time I see your face, I think about that woman who died because you couldn't be bothered to answer your phone." I moved into a friend's basement, working extra shifts to afford rent. Meanwhile, my family hired the best lawyer money could buy for Caleb. The local paper ran a story about the promising young athlete whose life was derailed by family tragedy. 6 months later, I got the court summons. I stared at the official document, my hands trembling. The prosecution wanted me to testify about Caleb's drinking habits, about that night. My family thought I'd been called as a character witness for him. I hadn't told them the truth yet. The morning of the trial, I sat in the parking lot outside the courthouse, watching my parents and Caleb walk up the steps. He wore an expensive suit, his lawyer beside him. They looked confident. They had no idea I'd been meeting with the prosecutor for weeks. Inside the courtroom, I took my seat in the witness section. When my family spotted me, Mom actually smiled and waved, probably thinking I was there to support Caleb. Dad nodded approvingly. Caleb's lawyer painted him as a good kid who made one mistake after being let down by family. The victim's family sat in the front row, the woman's husband clutching his young daughter's hand. Then the prosecutor called my name. "The state calls Dylan Morrison to the stand." The blood drained from my family's faces as I walked to the witness box. Mom's mouth fell open. Dad went rigid in his seat. As I raised my right hand to be sworn in, I looked directly at Caleb. His confident expression crumbled, because he knew what I was about to say, and it wasn't going to save him. The prosecutor approached the witness stand, her voice professional but warm. "Please state your relationship to the defendant." "I'm his older brother, Dylan Morrison." "And were you present the night of the accident?" "No, I was not." Caleb's lawyer started to look relieved. This was going exactly how they'd planned. "Did the defendant contact you that night requesting a ride?" I looked directly at Caleb, whose face had gone pale. "No, he did not call me." The prosecutor nodded. "To your knowledge, has the defendant ever asked you to be his designated driver?" "Never. Not once in 4 years of college parties." Dad was shaking his head violently, mouthing "liar" at me. Mom had started crying again. "Can you describe the defendant's drinking habits?" That's when I dropped the first bomb. Caleb has been drinking heavily since he was 16, not just at parties. He keeps a flask in his car, drinks before and after football practice, and has driven under the influence dozens of times. Caleb's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation and hearsay." "I'll rephrase," the prosecutor said smoothly. "Have you personally witnessed the defendant drinking and driving?" I pulled out my phone. "Yes, and I have video evidence." The courtroom erupted. Caleb's lawyer was shouting objections. Dad was on his feet, pointing at me and calling me a traitor. The judge was banging his gavel for order. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said over the noise, "the witness has provided the state with substantial evidence including video recordings, text messages, and photographs documenting the defendant's pattern of drunk driving." That got everyone's attention. The judge ordered the bailiff to collect my phone, and within minutes, the first video was playing on the courtroom's main screen. It showed Caleb at a party 3 months before the accident, clearly intoxicated, bragging about driving home drunk the previous weekend. In the background, you could hear his friends laughing as he described nearly hitting a mailbox. "I'm like the drunk driving champion," he slurred into the camera. "Never been caught." The victim's husband let out a strangled sob. His little daughter asked why the man was laughing about almost hitting something. The prosecutor played the next video. This one was from just 2 weeks before the accident. Caleb was stumbling toward his car after another party, and I'd followed him. "Bro, you're wasted," my voice said from behind the camera. "Let me drive you home." "Fuck off, Dylan." Caleb laughed. "I got this. I always got this." You could see him fumble with his keys, nearly falling over before managing to get into his car. The video ended with him peeling out of the driveway, tires squealing, but the worst was still coming. The prosecutor pulled up the text messages, dozens of them over the past year, all from Caleb to me. "Dude, I'm so fucked up, but I gotta get home. Just drove 80 in a 35 LMAU, so drunk. Almost hit a cop car tonight, but swerved at the last second. Why does everyone make such a big deal about drunk driving? I'm fine." And my responses begging him to stop, offering rides, threatening to tell our parents. His replies were always the same, variations of "mind your own business" and "I'm not as drunk as you think." The final message was from the night of the accident, sent at 2:23 a.m., just minutes before the crash. "Fuck this party sucked. Driving home. Probably gonna puke in my car, lol." I'd responded immediately, "Don't drive. I'll come get you right now. Where are you?" But there was no response. The next message was from Dad 40 minutes later, telling me to get to the hospital. The courtroom was dead silent as people absorbed what they'd just seen. The victim's husband was crying openly now. His daughter had buried her face in his chest, sensing the weight of the moment even if she didn't understand the details. Caleb's lawyer was frantically whispering in his ear, but Caleb just sat there, staring at his hands. The prosecutor turned back to me. "Did you ever tell your parents about your brother's drinking and driving?" "Multiple times. They said I was jealous of his success and making things up to get him in trouble. When I showed them videos similar to what you just saw, Dad said I was sabotaging family, and that successful people always have enemies, even in their own family." "What happened after the accident when you told them you'd never received a call from the defendant?" "They called me a liar and kicked me out of the house. They said I was responsible for the death of Margaret Chen because I'd failed to be there for my brother when he needed me." That was the victim's name, Margaret Chen, a 34-year-old mother of 2, driving home from her night shift at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. She'd been 3 blocks from her house when Caleb's car ran a red light going 78 miles per hour and slammed into her driver's side door. "To be clear," the prosecutor continued, "your family blamed you for this accident and forced you from your home based on the defendant's claim that he had called you for help?" "Yes." "And that claim was false?" "Completely false. I have phone records going back 2 years. Caleb has never once asked me to be his designated driver." The prosecutor walked back to her table and picked up a thick folder. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce the defendant's phone records from the night of the accident." Caleb's head snapped up. His lawyer was shaking his head, realizing what was coming. The prosecutor read from the official phone company document. "On the night in question, the defendant made the following calls. 3 calls to various teammates between 11:47 p.m. and 12:15 a.m. 1 call to Pizza Palace at 12:22 a.m. 1 call to his dealer at 1:45 a.m. lasting 37 seconds. And 1 call to his girlfriend at 2:31 a.m. lasting 12 seconds, which went to voicemail." She looked up at the jury. "At no point did the defendant attempt to contact his brother or any family member for assistance. The claim that he called for help was fabricated after the accident to shift blame and garner sympathy." Dad was staring at Caleb now, the realization dawning on his face. Mom had gone completely still, her tears stopping as the truth settled in. But I wasn't done. "There's more," I said, and the prosecutor nodded for me to continue. 3 days after the accident, when my parents kicked me out, Caleb came to see me. He was panicking because the police had requested his phone records. He begged me to lie for him, to say he'd called me but I'd missed it. When I refused, he offered me money. When I still refused, he threatened to tell everyone I was the real drunk driver that night. "Did you record this conversation?" I nodded and pulled out a small digital recorder from my jacket pocket. "I've been recording our family interactions for months because of situations like this." The audio was crystal clear. Caleb's voice, desperate and pleading. "Dylan, please, you have to help me. Just say I called you. Just say you didn't hear your phone or something. I'll give you $10,000. I'll get Dad to give you your job back at the store." My voice responded, "I'm not going to lie in court, Caleb. Someone died. So what? It was an accident. And if you don't help me, I'll tell everyone you were driving that night. I'll say we switched places at the hospital. Who do you think they'll believe? The college dropout with a history of problems, or the honor roll student with a full scholarship?" There was a long pause on the recording, then my voice again. "Are you seriously threatening to frame me for vehicular manslaughter? I'm offering you a choice. Help me, or I'll destroy you." The recording ended there. The courtroom was in chaos now. Dad was on his feet, shouting at Caleb. Mom was staring between her 2 sons like she couldn't recognize either of us. The judge was banging his gavel repeatedly, threatening to clear the courtroom. But the prosecutor wasn't finished. "Mr. Morrison, after this conversation with your brother, what did you do?" "I went to the police. I gave them everything. The videos, the texts, the recording of our conversation. I also gave them the names of 12 people who'd witnessed Caleb drinking and driving over the past 2 years. And why didn't you come forward sooner? I looked at my parents, both of whom were staring at me with a mixture of shock and betrayal. Because despite everything, he was still my little brother. I kept hoping he'd stop on his own. I thought if I just kept offering alternatives, kept begging him to be careful, maybe I could prevent something like this from happening. My voice cracked on the last words. I failed. Margaret Chen is dead because I wasn't brave enough to turn my brother in sooner. Her children don't have a mother because I chose family loyalty over doing what was right. The victim's husband stood up then, his face streaked with tears. Your Honor, may I address the witness? The judge nodded. The man walked closer to the witness stand, his young daughter's hand still in his. Mr. Morrison, he said, his voice steady despite his tears. My wife wouldn't want you to blame yourself. She was a nurse. She understood that people make their own choices. Your brother made his choice every time he got behind the wheel drunk. You tried to stop him. That's more than most people would have done. I broke down completely then. 6 months of guilt and anger and grief pouring out in front of a room full of strangers. During the recess, my parents approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Mom's face was puffy from crying, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Dylan, Mom said, her voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. We blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. You blamed me for something I warned you about for years, I said quietly. Every time I tried to tell you Caleb had a problem, you accused me of jealousy. Every time I showed you evidence, you said I was trying to sabotage him. Dad stepped forward, his hands shaking. Son, we made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Come home. We'll fix this. You can't fix this. Margaret Chen is still dead. Her kids still don't have a mother. And you threw me out like garbage because it was easier than admitting your golden boy wasn't perfect. We're family, Dad pleaded. Families forgive. Families protect each other, I shot back. They don't choose favorites. They don't ignore problems until someone dies. They don't throw out innocent children to protect guilty ones. I started to walk away, then turned back. I'll be testifying for the next 2 days. After that, don't contact me again. The second day of testimony focused on the pattern of enabling behavior my parents had displayed. The prosecutor called several witnesses who'd tried to report Caleb's drunk driving to my parents over the years. His high school guidance counselor testified that she'd called home 3 times to report smelling alcohol on Caleb during school hours. Mom had responded by switching him to a different school. A family friend testified that he'd seen Caleb drive drunk from our Christmas party 2 years earlier and had told Dad immediately. Dad had responded by uninviting him from future family gatherings. Even our neighbor testified that she'd called the police about Caleb's erratic late-night driving, only to have my parents show up at her door the next day threatening to sue her for harassment. By the time the defense put on their case, it was clear that Caleb's drunk driving wasn't an isolated incident. It was an enabled pattern of behavior that everyone except my parents had tried to address. Caleb's lawyer did his best to paint his client as a young man struggling with alcohol addiction who needed treatment, not prison. They brought in character witnesses, coaches, teachers, teammates, who spoke about his leadership and community service. But when Caleb took the stand in his own defense, everything fell apart. The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. Mr. Morrison, you testified that you were struggling with alcohol addiction. When did this addiction begin? I guess, senior year of high school. And in 4 years of struggle with addiction, how many times did you seek treatment? I didn't think I needed treatment. I see. But you just testified that you were struggling with addiction. How does someone struggle with addiction without recognizing they need help? Caleb fumbled for an answer. Did you ever attend AA meetings? No. Therapy sessions? No. Did you ever ask your parents for help with your alleged addiction? No, I didn't want to worry them. But you were fine with worrying them when you called them from jail after killing someone while driving drunk? Caleb's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Mr. Morrison, you testified that you called your brother the night of the accident asking for a ride. We've established that no such call was made. So let me ask you directly. Did you lie to your parents about calling your brother? Long pause. Yes. And did you allow your parents to blame your brother and kick him out of their home based on this lie? Another pause. Yes. Did you offer your brother money to lie under oath and support your false version of events? I was scared. That's not what I asked. Did you offer your brother money to commit perjury? Yes. Did you threaten to frame your brother for your crime if he refused to lie for you? Caleb's voice was barely audible. Yes. And despite all of this, you want this jury to believe you're a good person who made one mistake? Caleb broke down on the stand, admitting to years of drunk driving, acknowledging that he'd never tried to get help, and confessing that he'd been more worried about his scholarship than Margaret Chen's life. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was a month later. I testified again, this time asking for a harsh sentence. I read a statement I'd prepared. Your Honor, my brother had every opportunity to make different choices. He came from a loving family with resources to get help if he'd wanted it. He had a brother who begged him repeatedly to stop endangering lives. He was educated enough to understand the consequences of his actions. Margaret Chen deserved better than to die because someone prioritized their own convenience over her life. Her children deserved better than to lose their mother to someone who viewed drunk driving as a joke. Her husband deserved better than to become a widower because my brother couldn't be bothered to call an Uber. My family spent years enabling this behavior and covering up the warning signs. I spent years trying to stop it without being willing to take the hard step of turning him in. We all failed Margaret Chen and her family. The difference is that I have to live with knowing I could have prevented this. My brother has to live with knowing he caused it. My parents have to live with knowing they enabled it. But Margaret Chen doesn't get to live at all. Caleb was sentenced to 15 years for vehicular manslaughter, with the possibility of parole after 10. He was also sentenced to 5 additional years for witness intimidation, based on his threats against me. After the sentencing, Margaret Chen's husband approached me one final time. "I know this probably doesn't help," he said, "but Margaret would have wanted you to know she forgave you. She always said the hardest thing about being a nurse was watching families destroy themselves trying to protect someone who didn't want to be saved." I nodded, unable to speak. "Take care of yourself," he said. "Don't let this destroy you too." Outside the courthouse, my parents were waiting by their car. They looked older, smaller somehow. The past months had clearly taken their toll. "Dylan," Mom called out as I walked past. "Please, can we talk?" I stopped, but didn't turn around. "We know we can't undo what we did," Dad said, "but we want to try to make it right." "How?" I asked, finally facing them. "How do you make right throwing out an innocent child to protect a guilty one? How do you make right ignoring years of evidence because it was inconvenient? How do you make right choosing a lie over the truth because the truth was ugly?" "We don't know," Mom admitted, "but we want to try." I studied their faces, looking for some sign that they truly understood what they'd done. Not just the kicking me out part, but the years of enabling that led to a woman's death. "Caleb is going to prison for 15 years, I said quietly. "Are you going to spend that time telling everyone how unfair it is? Are you going to blame the prosecutor, the judge, the jury? Are you going to visit him every week and tell him he's still your golden boy?" They exchanged glances. "Because if you are," I continued, "then you haven't learned anything. You're still the same people who chose denial over accountability, fantasy over reality." Dad cleared his throat. "We've been going to therapy, together and separately, trying to understand how we failed both of you so badly. And what has therapy taught you? That we created the conditions for this tragedy," Mom said, her voice breaking. "That we were so invested in Caleb being perfect that we ignored clear signs he was struggling. That we punished you for telling us truths we didn't want to hear. And that we have no right to expect your forgiveness," Dad added. "But we're hoping someday you might be willing to let us try to earn it." I looked at them for a long moment. They seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled by my family's sincerity before. "If you want to earn my forgiveness," I said finally, "start by earning Margaret Chen's. Volunteer with organizations that fight drunk driving. Speak to high school students about what enabling looks like. Make sure her death means something more than just our family's destruction." "We will," Mom promised. "And understand that this isn't about me being angry with you," I said. "This is about me protecting myself from people who've proven they'll sacrifice me to protect their own comfort. You might be different people now, but I need to see that change sustained over years, not months." I started to walk away, then turned back one last time. "If you really want to make this right, stop making it about us. Stop making it about family healing and second chances and moving forward. Make it about the fact that a good person is dead because we all failed her in different ways. Make it about preventing the next family from going through what the Chens are going through. And make it about the fact that Caleb isn't the victim here. He never was." 3 years later, I was living in Portland, working as a counselor for at-risk youth. I'd used my experience with my family to help kids whose parents struggled with addiction, denial, or enabling behaviors. I got a letter from Mom. She and Dad had started a nonprofit focused on family intervention for substance abuse. They'd spoken at over 100 schools and community centers, sharing their story as an example of how family enablement leads to tragedy. She included a newspaper clipping. They'd raised enough money to fund a new trauma center at the hospital where Margaret Chen had worked. It was being named in her honor. At the bottom of the letter, Mom wrote, "We know we can't bring her back. We know we can't undo the harm we caused you, but we're trying to make sure some good comes from all this pain. Not for us, for families who might avoid walking our path." I kept the letter, but didn't respond. 6 months later, I got another letter. This one was from Caleb, writing from prison. He'd completed his GED and was working on a bachelor's degree. He'd been sober for 3 years and was leading AA meetings for other inmates. He'd written letters to Margaret Chen's family, letters he never intended to send, but that helped him process his guilt and responsibility. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he wrote. "I don't even want you to. What I did was unforgivable, and the lies I told afterward were cowardly. You tried to save me from myself, and I responded by trying to destroy you. I'm writing because I want you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all those years. I wasn't struggling with addiction. I was choosing to be selfish and reckless. I wasn't a victim of circumstances. I was the person creating dangerous circumstances for everyone around me. Margaret Chen died because of choices I made. You were thrown out of our family because of lies I told. Our parents spent years enabling me because I manipulated their love for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to live with what I've done, but I'm trying to use my time here to become someone who deserves the second chance Mrs. Chen will never get." I read the letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer with Mom's letter. A year later, I got a call from Margaret Chen's husband. He tracked down my number through the Victims Assistance Program. "I hope you don't mind me calling," he said. "I wanted you to know that your parents reached out to us through the proper channels. They asked if there was anything they could do to honor Margaret's memory. What did you tell them?" I told them Margaret always said the best way to honor someone is to become the person they believed you could be. Then I told them about some of the programs Margaret supported when she was alive. He paused. "They've been volunteering at the free clinic where she used to work on weekends. Your mother reads to kids in the pediatric ward. Your father helps with transportation for patients who can't drive themselves to appointments. How long have they been doing that? About 2 years now. They don't make a big deal of it. They just show up and work. Margaret would have liked that. After I hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about accountability and redemption, about the difference between earning forgiveness and demanding it. My family had destroyed themselves trying to protect someone who didn't want protection. They'd sacrificed truth for comfort, accountability for convenience. They'd enabled someone they loved right into becoming a killer. But they'd also spent 3 years doing the hard work of facing what they'd done and trying to prevent other families from making the same mistakes. I pulled out their letters and read them again. Then I sat down and wrote my first letter back. Mom and Dad, I began. I heard about your work at the clinic. Margaret Chen's husband says you've been volunteering there for 2 years. If that's true, then maybe we can start having a conversation about what family actually means. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was possibility. And for the first time in 4 years, that felt like enough. I sealed the letter and walked to the mailbox, thinking about second chances and the difference between earning them and expecting them. My phone buzzed with a text from one of the kids I counseled, a 16-year-old whose father was an alcoholic. He crashed the car again last night. Mom wants me to lie to the police and say I was driving. What do? I looked at the text for a long moment, remembering all the times I'd faced similar choices with Caleb, remembering the woman who died because I waited too long to do the right thing. You tell the truth, I texted back. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Meet me at the office in an hour and we'll figure out how to keep you safe while doing what's right. I dropped my letter in the mailbox and headed back to work. Some family traditions needed to be broken. Some cycles needed to end. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be an accomplice to someone else's destruction, even when that someone is family, even when they beg you to, even when everyone else thinks you're the villain for saying no. Margaret Chen deserved better than the choices we all made. But maybe the rest of us could still become people worthy of the second chance she'd never get.